In this video we will finalize the compositing of our epic creature rendering by adding glow effects, film grain, chromatic aberration and a vignette effect. So now we want to make these bigger scales glow, and for this, if we go to the creature down here, we have this emit output. Control Shift left click here 3 times, and this is what it looks like. It's a black image where we can only see the emissive part of these bigger scales. And if I hit Shift A, search for the glare node, let's plug it behind here, and with this node we can make things really glow. For the glare type, let's switch to fog glow, and then we have to lower the threshold. The higher the value is, then only these very bright pixels will glow, and the lower the value is, the more the not so bright pixels will start to glow. And since here everything is black except these scales here, let's just lower it to 0, and then you can see how nicely everything starts to glow. Let's change the size to 9, which is the maximum size, and then the glow radius will be a bit bigger. And now all we need to do is to put this on top of our image, which happens behind the mist layer. For this we need again a mix node, plug it behind here. Then let's pack this into the second input, Control Shift left click on the mix node. However, now it's just mixing between either the rendered image here or the glowing bits, but I just want to have everything black transparent and only see the glowing parts. And for this we have to change the blend mode to add. And now we can change the intensity of the glow by changing this factor here. But I leave it at 1. So if you like, we can move everything over again. Take these two, Control J, let's call it Scales Glow, make the label size bigger. And now let's add a glow from the background, which works basically the same. So let's add a glare node. Take the image, in this case from the background, plug it into the glare node, change this to fog glow, threshold to 0, size to 9. Let's see what's going on here. So this glare node is now just making the background brighter, basically, because we don't have the creature here and I want this glowing parts to shine over the creature. So what we need here is to take the mask from the render layer of the mist, which is this one here, the alpha channel, and cut it away from the background. So let's add a mix node in between here, take the alpha as mix factor, and let's see what's going on here. That looks good already. And now let's just make the white part black. Perfect. And now if we run it through the glare node, you can see that it shines above this area here, which is exactly what I want. However, of course, we don't want to have the pure background image. We want to have the adjusted one. So let's take this one inside. You can see the other input is automatically moving down. So let's pull it out and release your mouse. Then it will be removed. And now we have the adjusted colors here, which are glowing a bit over the black part of the creature. And now again, let's add a mix node, set it to add, then take the image below here, plug this into one input and the other one into the other. Control Shift left click here. So now you can see the glowing part is shining above the rocks over here, which looks really nice and merges the whole image better together. But now we have also this weird transparent part down here, which is coming from this here. You can see here it's also transparent. So what we can do is in between the glare node and the mix node, let's add an alpha over node. Switch the inputs here and let's change the lower part to be completely black. Then we add the glare node and then we can add this on top of the rest. Yeah, now this is fixed. Let's connect this with a composite input and we are getting closer. So let's select this, Control J. Let's call it Sky Glow. And you see with all these frames, it's relatively easy to understand what is what. Let's move this also into this one here. So now I want to add a little bit of simple film grain back to the image. Film grain is basically a little bit of noise we add on top of the image to merge everything nicely together. For this, let's move this quickly up, go to the textures, add a new texture. Let's call it grain and change the type to noise. Now we have this noise texture. Let's move this back down here. And this noise texture we can now also use here in the compositor. Shift A, search, texture, and here we can pick the grain texture. It looks something like this. And again, let's search for a mix node, plug it behind here, add the texture as second input. Then let's switch the mix mode to multiply, which will basically make all the white parts of the image transparent. Now we can see all these black spots. And with the factor, we can now lower this effect. And I think something like a 0.25 works nicely here. However, the effect is pretty harsh. So let's search for a filter node, plug this in between here. The filter type is set to soften automatically. And let's lower this a bit. Yeah, and you can see here with a factor of 0.4, if I mute this, it will be softened a bit. So this adds this nice grain all over the image here, which makes it also look a bit more like a photo. So this one here, let's frame this. It's the grain. Now there are only two things missing. On the one hand, let's add the lens distortion node, plug it behind here. And here we can distort the image. Something crazy like this. But we can also go into the negative direction, something like this. But here I want to use very low values. So something like negative 0.01 will slightly distort the image. And then we can add this dispersion. If I make this very strong, you can see we have this chromatic aberration effect. But don't overdo it with this effect. So here also, let's use something very, very little. And this will add this slight chromatic aberration at the edges, which again helps to blend the whole image better together. So these are very subtle effects, but they really help in the end. So the last thing I do is to add a vignette effect. For this, let's add an ellipse mask. Ctrl-Shift left click here. This is just this disc shape here, and let's make it bigger. 0.9, 0.9 also for the height. Then with Shift A, let's add a blur node. Pack it behind here. And here, make sure to enable relative. That means when you later on change the image resolution, it will always have the same size. And then let's blur it in X and Y 25%. And with a mix node, let's add it on top here. Ctrl-Shift left click here, and let's change the mix type to multiply, so the white part will be transparent and we will only see the dark edges here. And now again with the effect slider, we can change how strong this effect should be. And it should not be really strong, it should just darken the edges here a tiny bit. Something like this. Then let's select these three nodes down here, Ctrl-J. Let's call it vignette, label size 40. Let's press N. Let's move these over and these here. The lens distortion we can leave separate. And now we have our final compositing setup. So to quickly go through this one more time, we have the creature here, the environment and the background. The creature we made a bit brighter, the background a bit desaturated and darker, and then we mixed these two together. For the background, we changed the color a bit, made it darker and less saturated, added a bit of contrast, mixed it behind the other two layers. Then we have the mist parse here, which we can control through the color ramp, mixed it with the alpha mask here, and then added a bit of color, and on top of the rest to have this little atmospheric fog here in the distance. Then with the emission output of the creature, we added a glare node and added this on top of our image. A similar thing we did with our sky. We masked out the creature, made sure that this bottom part down here is dark, added the glare node to make everything glow a bit, and added this on top of our image. Then we added a grain texture, softened this a bit, and added this on top of our image. Then we have a little bit of lens distortion here on the edges, and then with this ellipse mask, which we blurred, we added a vignette on top. So it doesn't look like much, but down here I quickly added an alpha over node and another alpha over node and just mixed the original images together to see the original result, which was this one here. And maybe you like this even more because it's so colorful. And this is the adjusted compositing result, which I find pretty much cooler. So, but that's not the final video of this chapter. In the next video, we will do some little tweaks here and there and save out the final image. But before we do this, as always, don't forget to save.